We are on the record. Welcome to the Washington Township Historical Society meeting of May 20.
John, are you on?
Should be. Can you hear me? 1, 2. We
Yes,
got
I
it.
can hear you.
All right. We will take 2. Hey, welcome to the Washington Township Historical Society meeting of May 2024. Here at the Museum of Local History in Fremont, Hensa, and at Ellsworth. We have about 10 people in attendance, and it's about 4 or 5 online. Before I turn it over to Paul Sethi, who has organized today's program, if each of the people here could quickly identify themselves so we know who they are, and starting with Kathy Kimberly. Thank you.
Past president. Yeah.
Okay. And Gary E.'s mom. And Gary E.'s mother.
Gary E.'s mother.
That would help. Teacher of the year. Bruce. Thank you. Okay, well, thank you. Paul Sethi, who will be our speaker, I'll let him introduce, and I'm John Weed. Thank you.
Okay, welcome everybody. Thank you for joining us this evening. Everybody present here in the room, and I expect we're going to have a lot more on Zoom joining in as we usually do. I will tell you that my family moved here in May of 1962, my parents, and so I grew up in Fremont, right here in Mission San Jose, and have been involved with a number of our historical communities over the years. This evening, we were hoping to have Supervisor David Halbert with us. His district representative is here, Kathy Kimberlin, and hopefully we can have Supervisor Halbert in the future at some point. I wanted to kick us off with a little bit of noteworthy history about Alameda County and Washington Township before I turn it over to our guest speaker this evening, Steve Minniear, the official historian for the city of Dublin, who is the new author of a book entitled Alameda County Sheriff's Office. And I was hoping to share this with the supervisor, and I will at some point give him an education on Washington Township. So for those that don't know, before gold was discovered in California, Washington Township was the commercial heart of all of California, from the Oregon border down to San Diego and the Mexican border. In the 1830s and 1840s, it was the most prosperous place in California, largely emanating out of the prosperity of Mission San Jose here, which was the most prosperous mission in California. And that was largely due to two factors. One, we had an untapped Niles Cone aquifer, an underground water source that covered the entire Tri-City area. And so water was very accessible from Alameda Creek and from just tapping in just a few feet down below the surface, you could grow orchard trees and vegetables and everything around here. And for that reason, when the gold rush happened, this became the breadbasket of the gold rush era, especially Mission San Jose, Irvington, Centerville. And that is all the food production went over by wagon trail over the Snow Grade out to Pleasanton, Livermore, then to Stockton. And today that is our current Highway 680 and 580 routes that go out to Stockton. If you go to Stockton today, you will see three highways that go north, central, and south to Highway 49. All of these roads combined were called Old Miners Road that fed the miners up in the Sierras with meat and largely vegetables that were a lot of root vegetables, cauliflower, cabbage, other things, beets that could be stored for a long time. The Horner brothers became famous for growing potatoes here and became multimillionaires before the gold rush on the growth of potatoes. So there's a lot of history here. And when the gold rush started and Alameda County was formed in 1853, Oakland was a nascent city, just starting to develop as an outskirt of San Francisco, what was called Contra Costa across the bay. And they had no water source. So they tapped into Alvarado in the Union City area, close to the bay, where we had artesian wells, and they built hollowed out redwood pipelines that went all the way up to Oakland to deliver water to the growth of that area of community. And they were stealing water from our Washington Township area. So was San Francisco, and long story made short, that's what caused the formation of the Alameda County Water District to save the water interests of our community. Joseph Shin was the first president and activist that helped, and William Patterson. These were the two key architects of forming the Alameda County Water District. So importantly for the supervisor, the county seat was first in Alvarado. It was never in Oakland. When the county was formed, Alvarado was not only the county seat for the meeting of our Board of Supervisors, but the county courthouse was in Alvarado. The very first Bank of Alameda County was in Alvarado. And if you go to the Old Town section, and I know that Tim Swenson, who's in the back, our happy technician back there, he is an official historian on Union City, and he can give the walking tour on the Old Town of Alvarado. And importantly, in those days, the Board of Supervisors was split up just like we have today, roughly. And we had a supervisor from Murray Township out in the Tri-Valley area, and supervisor from the lower county area here in Washington Township. And so it all tells you why Washington Township was so important in those days preceding the gold rush and after the gold rush. And in the years before the gold rush, I'll conclude with this, that we had many Mormon settlers that came on the ship, the Brooklyn, to San Francisco and settled here when there were more people on the ship than there were residents of San Francisco, Yerba Buena. And we also had members of the Donner Party in the 1840s that settled here and in Santa Clara County as well. So there's quite a history to the local area, and we're happy this evening to look into one of the other aspects of Alameda County, which is the sheriff's office. And I recommended in our newsletter that people read Lawman, The Life and Times of Harry Morse, if you can order it from Amazon. It's one of the most exciting, thrilling books you'll ever read, written by a San Francisco attorney who's an expert in Western histories. And it's a thoroughly enjoyable book. I reread it for the second time just this past month. And that Harry Morse is one of the great sheriffs and detectives that hopefully Steve will cover. So I'm going to turn it over to our special guest, Steve Minniear, and I'll let him give up his own little bio. Did I turn the microphone? Okay.
I'm hoping my microphone works. Can we check it?
So Steve, welcome to our group tonight. Thank you for coming here.
Thank you for having me.
Steve and I actually overlapped as students at UC Berkeley many years ago.
There were only 30,000 of us that year.
Yes, there were. And I just saw that the freshman admitting class is somewhere around 15,000 this year. And the year I was accepted, it was only about 4,000. So, I mean, yes, UC Berkeley has grown. All right, Steve,
Thank you very much.
good luck here.
Wow, thank you very much. I'm very happy to be here today. I will have the technician in the back scream and yell if I talk too loud or talk too soft, because my voice will go in and out. I'm very happy to talk a little bit about the Alameda County Sheriff's Office. Can we turn the lights down? It might be a little bit easier to see. And I want you to know that I have made this presentation specifically for you. This is about Washington Township. One of the fun things, I did this on purpose, but also not on purpose. You'll hear more about Alvarado in a minute. I fell into this because I'm a resident of Dublin. I was interested in Dublin's history primarily because of its World War II history. Not many people realize nowadays that there were 3 naval bases in Dublin during World War II. On any given day, there were probably 60 or 70,000 sailors out in Dublin. And in the course of World War II, 350,000 people went through Dublin. So my interest in Dublin had to do with World War II. One of the things that happened after World War II was there was a sheriff by the name of Gleason, and he wanted to expand the county jail. He wasn't happy with the old jail that was in downtown Oakland. So he approached the Navy, and the Navy deeded to him the Navy Brig. And the Navy Brig was the original Santa Rita jail. So for those of us who've been around a while, if you remember going out Highway 580, there were these kind of very scary looking towers and wooden buildings on the side of the road near Santa Rita Road. That was the original brig for the Navy that became the original Santa Rita Rehabilitation Center, which existed up from 1947 to 1989. And then the county was very nice. I guess they liked having the jail in Dublin, so they built the brand new jail in Dublin too. So we still have the jail. So part of all of that goes to the fact that the Navy left a lot of documents and the sheriff's office created a lot of documents, and they all got stored out there. And I found lots of them when I went to volunteer on yet another historical society. So for those of you who are not involved in 5 or 6 historical societies, come on, get with it. Because there's always another one out there who wants you. But in the course of that, I found pictures. The amazing part about the Alameda County Sheriff's Office, it's not too amazing when you think about what sheriff's offices do, what police departments do. They take a lot of pictures, they take a lot of mug shots. There are mug shots in the records out at the Sheriff's Archive that go all the way back to the 1880s when photography was brand new. And they have huge journals like this of page after page. And one of the funny things is, you know, mug shots are not the best look for most people. You're not at your best when you put in front of the camera. But back in the day, in the 1800s and early 1900s, all the way up to the 50s, if you were a man, you had to wear a hat when you went out in public. So this one particular hat sits at the photographer's studio for the jail, and it is smashed on every single miscreant's head. So that hat has several thousand pictures, even though there's several thousand different people. But coming across this trove of pictures just made me say, I've got to write a book about this. And having already done a book for Arcadia Press, this was kind of a natural. So I'm going to show you a little bit about the Alameda County Sheriff's Office. So we'll go to the next one, if this works. Yes. So the first thing I want to tell you is everything that you think you know about the sheriff is wrong. Okay, because this is what we think sheriffs is. When we think of a sheriff, we think of Andy Taylor, we think of, you know, TV, or if we think of bad sheriffs, we think of the sheriff of Nottingham. Every single sheriff of Nottingham was this like cruel and unusual kind of character. Or one of my favorite films, Silverado, which I watch over and over. Or probably I had to look really hard to find a modern day sheriff on TV, and the closest I could get was Longmire. I'm glad that we are all of a certain age because you guys get every one of these. And if I had a younger crowd, probably not. But all these things that these people do on the movies are pretty much not what sheriffs do. Sheriffs are not the chief law enforcement of a town. That is a marshal. A sheriff is the chief law enforcement officer for a county. And sheriffs are important back in the day because there are no cities, there are no city police departments. So the sheriff becomes the de facto law enforcement for the entire county. And for those of us who have driven Alameda County, think how big that county is and think how big it was when you did it on a horse and buggy or on a horse. And there were plenty of places if you were a bad guy that you could hide out here in Alameda County, and lots of them did. But the other thing, and the other reason why people don't like sheriffs, which is still true, is that they were the tax collectors at the time. So yeah, it's not a good look. So there you go. There will be a quiz at the end. That is every single sheriff we have ever had. With our current sheriff, Eugenia Sanchez down here. And you can find Harry Morris up there. He's 1, 2, 3, 4th from the beginning. And our very first one is Andrew Broder. One of the fun things about Dublin is okay. Oh, good. I think I'm going to have to talk like this into the microphone for the rest of the night. We have lots of roads named after sheriffs because we have the jail out there. We have a Broder. We have a let's see, who else do we have? I think we have a Driver, and we have a Madigan. So anyway, so pick your favorite sheriff. Harry Morris is not. Does it work on this one? Okay. So I'm gonna cramp my style. I can't roll back and forth now.
And I guess your favorite was Gleason.
My favorite is Gleason, because he's the most interesting one as far as I'm concerned. Harry Morris was absolutely wonderful for self-promotion. But when you read Bosenecker's book, everything that he talks about, he did after he was the sheriff. So there's a lot of things you can do when he was essentially a Pinkerton type detective back in the day. So he had a lot of latitude and he would go wherever the bad guys were. And one of the reasons he went after the bad guys was because you didn't get a salary as a sheriff. You got finder's fees for the people that you arrested and then passed on to the people who wanted them jailed. So the very first interesting case and the very first linkage for Alvarado was probably the most important case of the very first sheriff. This is up here to remind you that's the way Alameda County looked. Those were the mail routes, which meant those were the only roads that really pretty much existed and how people got back and forth. And so you can see how few places there are, how far apart they are. But that's actually where the mail went. So Broderick is the first sheriff. Alameda County is formed in 1853 out of parts of Santa Clara and parts of Contra Costa. And the reason the county is created is because certain people in Oakland and certain people in this area wanted their own elected officials. They wanted their own county. So Alameda County is not one of the original counties. It came later, and it came in 1853. And the original sheriff is elected. There were so few people in Alameda County that when it came time to make up the list for who wants to run, everybody could run if you were a white male. But they didn't put their names on the ballot. They put their nicknames. And that's how they were elected. But there were only about 6,000 voters in the entire county in 1853. And as you see here,
I don't want to start. I'll just.
Okay. One of the banes of any existence of making presentations is the technical part, because it always gets screwed up. Always. Anyway, Broder. So Broder comes to work one day. There's been a crime at the capital of Alameda County. This is a big crime. Someone broke into the county courthouse, which is actually a general store on the bottom and the city buildings are on the top. So someone broke in and stole the entire treasury for Alameda County. That is not the kind of thing you want to come to work and say, the entire treasury of $11,755.31. So that doesn't seem like a lot of money, but it's a huge amount of money. The other thing to think about is when you're robbing the county, this is all in silver and gold. That's a really heavy amount to take out. It's also, if you're running around the small town of Alvarado with bags of gold in your hand, that's pretty much a good indication that someone's going to stop you. But they didn't find the person. So Broder and the chief lawyer for the county decide they have to go find the money. They go out and they decide somehow that they have a hint that the person who stole the money has left town and gone to San Francisco, which means that you have to get on a boat in Union City and take the boat over to San Francisco. So they get to San Francisco and they think they know where the bad guy is. He's getting on a boat and he's leaving town. So they get on the same boat and the boat gets out to Fort Point at the Golden Gate and they convince the captain to stop and they search the entire ship for the $7,000 or $8,000 in gold that they think is there. They search the whole ship. Nothing is there. The captain is not very happy that his timetable has been off. So he kicks the sheriff off and the judge, and they row back to San Francisco. And then they take a boat back to Union City. And then they come the next morning at light. The judge walks underneath the building and finds half of the money. So half of the money had been dropped on the way that the person was getting away. One of the bad things about doing history in early California is that your sources of information are the newspapers. Okay. And the newspaper will tell you of what happened, but quite often they're not interested in telling you anything after that. The treasury was robbed. Oh my God. We never find out in the record who stole the stuff. Nothing at all. So that's what law enforcement is. That's the chief law enforcement officer. The oddest thing about it was the safe was not broken into. Apparently there was an extra key around and someone had just opened it. And the other real odd thing was all the sheriff's fees that he had collected were left on top of the safe. So his money was still there. It's everybody else's money that was gone. So lots and lots of stuff happened. We have lots of sheriffs. We have the big crime wave of California, which is pretty much, horse stealing and cattle stealing, because besides Washington Township, Murray Township, it's all about the cattle raising. It's all about sending the cattle up to the gold country, later on sending cattle to San Francisco and other places, just as Washington Township grows crops for the Bay Area. And by the way, you guys are not the only ones who had your water stolen. Most of the water in the Amador Valley was drained by San Francisco until there was nothing left. And that's when they went after Hetch Hetchy. But one of the saddest events in Alameda County Sheriff history happens in 1898, when a character in Oakland is not happy with the gambling arrangements that he's been going through. He's so unhappy that he kills somebody, decides that's a bad thing, and he goes to hide, and the sheriff comes after him and the sheriff's deputies come after him. And as an indication of law enforcement back in the day, most of the sheriff's deputies happen to be members of the sheriff's family. They cordon off the area where the criminal has fled. The criminal has fled back to his work. His work is a gunpowder mill, and he has barricaded himself inside the gunpowder mill. After a long night, they think they're going to talk him out, but at the last minute, he runs back inside and there's a huge explosion that basically destroys the small community of Melrose, which is a part of Oakland. It's outside of Oakland, so it's unincorporated. Kills about 5 or 6 people in the area around. It's the single largest loss of life for Alameda County Sheriff's Office in its history. And those are the people who are gone. It also destroys the powder works. It destroys a nearby temporary army base that had been set up for soldiers who were getting ready to go to the Spanish-American War and in the Philippines. Huge, huge loss of life. Other things about history is reading what you can write in a newspaper in 1898 is a little scary about what they can get away with saying about people. So they had decided that he was the murderer, regardless of what happens after the gambling incident. He is known as a murderous Chinese. So the attitudes are reflected in the newspapers, and it makes it very, very hard to sometimes get past some of that. And there are some of it was such a big explosion, could be felt in San Francisco. It was such a large event in California history that it made actually world news. And this was a presentation that was given in book form about the event. Our next big interesting period for Alameda County sheriffs is the Prohibition. Which leads to all sorts of very interesting things coming up, including the issue of how do you uphold laws that you don't necessarily agree with, and to what extent do you enforce laws sometimes. which led to so many people being in. How often do you find a jail that makes its own postcard? This is a postcard for the Barnett Hotel, which was the downtown jail for the county in Oakland at the time. He had lots of people in there from 1919 on during Prohibition, and that's Frank Barnett, the sheriff, one of the longer tenured sheriffs in Alameda County. He was there for 20 years. Most sheriffs only last one term, which was 2 years, or two terms, which are 4 years. And almost none of the sheriffs elected had any background in law enforcement. It was not a requirement to be sheriff. The requirement was to have a bunch of people vote for you. Which leads, after Barnett is thrown out of office by the character over here by the name of Burton Becker. Burton Becker is the chief of police for Piedmont and decides that he wants to be the sheriff for Alameda County. He runs one of the dirtiest campaigns imaginable, basically implicating Barnett in the murder of a woman who actually happened to be running a scheme where she was telling multiple men in different parts of this Bay Area that they were the father of the children. It was the same child each time, which is kind of an interesting thing. And she apparently got lots of money. But anyway, that was the implication thrown at Barnett. So Burton is running on a clean slate bill. He wants to clean up the county. It's a very, very interesting time. He gets himself elected, and almost immediately, as part of his campaign to clean up crime, he runs a protection racket for Chinese gamblers in Oakland. So he is raking money off the gamblers who are operating in Oakland. He is also the prime leader of the Ku Klux Klan in the 1920s in the Bay Area. At that time, the Ku Klux Klan was so popular, they actually had conventions in downtown Oakland. So there was a crusading district attorney who wanted to make a name for himself and who was not happy with the way things are going. And you may recognize District Attorney Earl Warren's name. He goes on to do many other things, but one of the first things he does is he gets rid of Burton Becker. Burton. So the picture you have up here is Earl Warren. The bagman here is the guy who fingered Burton. The picture that you see on the right is the picture taken the day after Burton resigned office as sheriff. It's also his mugshot for San Quentin. Thank goodness it's the only sheriff that we've ever had who went from sheriff to being in San Quentin. We have had sheriffs who've gone on to lead San Quentin as the warden. This was the first one who wound up being a prisoner, and the only one. So you will also see your Washington Township map. That's the way the sheriff's office looked at the county in 1949 as it was going forward. This was under the leadership of Jack Gleason. Gleason was one of the last sheriffs who was primarily a civilian. He was elected, he was appointed in 1940 and elected soon after. He wanted to have a honor farm. He wanted to have prisoners grow their own food, run their own cattle, to actually have a skill after they got out of jail so that they didn't have to fall back on all the things that they learned in jail from the other criminals. So he had a very forward-looking attitude toward law enforcement and rehabilitation. He was also a very, very active individual. He believed in radio cars and doing a number of very forward-thinking things. So this is where we get to you guys. This is back in the day, Washington Township's Alameda County deputies. You guys are so far away from anything else. These two people live out here and they're able to use their private cars to be the sheriff's cars out here. The sheriffs don't buy cars. The deputies use their own cars. In fact, the deputies had to add a special red light and a siren to their car. And if I remember correctly, the cars were so poor, they said you could chase a car or you could sound the siren, but you couldn't do both. And then one of the fun things is you see the light over here on the car. We have that light at the Alameda County Sheriff's Archive. That and the siren were taken off the car when these guys finally got their own patrol car out here. But these are your two of your stalwart deputies taking care of Washington Township back in the day. By the way, for the historical people here, if you want any of these pictures, I would be happy to send them to you with all the information associated with them. I have digital copies of everything. Okay, now this is a building that still exists at 2550 Peralta, which is the corner of Martha Avenue and Paseo Padre. The building is still here. That is the sheriff's substation for Washington Township back in the day. It existed up until the foundation of Fremont. When Fremont became a city, it took over law enforcement duties. And in fact, many of the characters, this is the day it opened back in a long time ago, 1951. Many of those deputies left the sheriff's office to become part of the various police departments of the cities here. A question?
I wanted to share with the state that my grandfather was a superintendent of jails. And when he came here for a year visit, he wanted to go visit that facility and meet with the police people that were there, the sheriff's deputies. And they had a 2-cell jail that was inside. And I remember my grandfather going to make an inspection of it.
Hold that thought because there'll be a picture that relates to that a little bit later. These are also your stalwart deputies looking very happy in their brand new uniforms and their brand new building on that day. So how many people remember paperwork? This is back when they actually had paper. That's them doing paperwork in the office. And believe it or not, for those people who've ever seen those old desks, those steel case desks are now considered collector's items. Mid-century modern, they're a thing. Not so much the phone though. And then for those of us who remember typewriters, yes, they actually used typewriters back in the day. When we give some orientation to the brand new deputy sheriffs as they go through the academy, and we show them some of these pictures, and they just can't believe it. They just can't believe what it was like back in the day. Oh, I will also say this picture is toward the end because you can see a map of the city of Fremont. So that's just in the time when they were closing down this facility, which is not too far away from here. And that's the day it closed. And I'm going to leave you with just a couple of other major events in Alameda County Sheriff history. A couple that the riots in Berkeley. No law enforcement agency in the Bay Area was prepared for the size of the riots or how to deal with the demonstrations. Alameda County Sheriff's Office was the mutual aid facility. They were called upon to help the cities. So when the city couldn't handle it or the university couldn't handle it, the first people that they would call in, the largest agency around at the time, would have been the sheriff's office. So that's who you see up on the top two, the sheriff's deputies in their riot gear, getting ready to handle a situation where some of us went to school. This is long before I was there. I just want to make that really clear. This right here is one of my favorite pictures of all time, of all the hundreds of pictures that I went through to make the book. It's 3 sheriff's deputies sitting on the play structure and People's Park as they rest in between various events. There is also within any organization, there are some legends and there are some myths that grow up. And sometimes the myths are based in reality. So what you see up here is the uniform that the sheriff's office struggled to find quickly. They realized after the first few demonstrations that it's not a good thing to show up at a demonstration as a sheriff with your regular uniform. It gets dirty, it gets ripped, it gets destroyed. So they said, okay, fine, what do we do? And at the time, someone says, well, we'll get overalls. And so the sheriff's office is rapidly calling around the entire county trying to find 200 sets of overalls, which is not something you can normally have. They do find in San Leandro a apparel company, and the apparel company gets this phone call and they say, do you happen to have 200, Ben Davis, overalls? And they go, yes. And I imagine what's really going through that shopkeeper's mind is, I had these 200 overalls and I never thought I was going to get rid of them, but I will sell them to the sheriff's office right away. So suddenly the sheriff's office can equip its riot squad, which it never had before, in these blue uniforms. So what happens is in 1968, they go out to do a demonstration in Berkeley and in Oakland. And there was this movie that came out around that time. It was by the Beatles, something called Yellow Submarine. And the bad guys were called Blue Meanies. So with that uniform being worn by the Alameda County Sheriff's Office and the demonstrators having seen the movie, Blue Meanies became the new name for the Alameda County Riot Squad. In the last 50 or 60 years, the term Blue Meanie is now used for any law enforcement officer in the state, in the country, or worldwide. So the Blue Meanie name started here with the Alameda County Sheriff's Office. And oddly enough, they're very proud about that. I also have the sign here. The sign over here is also in the Sheriff's Archive. And I had to take a picture of it because it was, liberated from a group of people at the University of California. Which just goes to show that you can be at a riot at the University of California, one of the premier institutions in the country, and not be able to spell psychotic. Psychopathic. Anyway, so we're almost done. This is the original Santa Rita jail. It was out on Highway 50, Highway 580, near Santa Rita Road. It was originally the jail for the Navy back in the day, and it lasted from 1947 to 49. The interesting thing about this jail was what Gleason had in mind was he was able to raise cattle out there. He was able to raise hogs out there, fruits, vegetables, tomatoes. The jail paid for itself in terms of food and tailoring and clothing for the up to 80% for some points in the 50s and the 60s. And it was one of the premier rehabilitation facilities in the country at the time, which also is kind of fun because there's another set of pictures that I don't have here. It's the sheriffs in their uniforms, riding horses, herding cattle. So yeah, you can still have fun as the sheriff. The jail closed around 1989. It was falling into disrepute. One of the problems was the jail was never designed to have the number of people in it or last as long as it did. There were people actually escaping from the jail. And the number of escapes were getting so numerous that one day someone decided that they had had enough. So early in the morning, a new sign appeared in the middle of Highway 580, and it said that it was an escapee crossing. The sheriff was not happy, so immediately was taken down and immediately disappeared, only to resurface about 30 years later. And now we have that in the sheriff's archive. Everybody tells me they know who it is, who did it, but they won't tell me. So go figure. That's our new jail. Also on Santa Rita, near Santa Rita. And I can't finish this up without saying there's a Dublin police car. The Alameda County Sheriff also provides law enforcement activities for the city of Dublin, for the airport, and for AC Transit. So it does provide contract services for a number of us. And continues to do unincorporated Alameda County, which is a very difficult thing to do nowadays because there are unincorporated bits and pieces of Alameda County even within general city areas. Yeah. So, there you go. And thank you for your time. And if you have any questions, I'd be happy to answer them. That's it.
How did the sheriff department take on the responsibility of the jail? What was the logistics of that?
In this state of California, the sheriff is always responsible for the jail. So every single county, that it is a responsibility of the sheriff of that county to run the county jails. Yeah. So that's the odd thing. While in San Francisco, which is a city county, there is still a sheriff of San Francisco as well as a chief of police of San Francisco. The sheriff runs the jails. The sheriffs also provide security in all the courts. So that's their two major activities. Anything?
Area that the sheriff still controls, Alameda Creek, Rio City of Fremont. Terms of anything that happens on Alameda Creek over the sheriff's department.
There are a whole bunch of places in the county where if a crime occurs, someone has to quickly figure out, who does this belong to? It's a nice thing nowadays in modern Alameda County that most of the law enforcement agencies all the training, the sheriff's office is also taken over training. So if you have a new recruit for whatever police department, they go through the Alameda County Sheriff's Academy. So they all get the same basic training of all the standard California requirements before they then go off to their individual police departments. So that is another thing that you will see out at Santa Rita. The Alameda County law enforcement academies are all done out there.
Population of Santa Rita jail.
I think it's only about 1,000. It is one of the largest jails of the county, but it's not full. It's running about 50%. So I may be off, but I would recommend go looking at the websites and they will tell you exactly how much it is. So, yes. So, Dublin is really lucky because we get all the prisons for everybody. So there is a county jail in Dublin and there is a federal jail in Dublin. And the federal jail was a women's only facility. And that is the one that had some significant problems and that was basically closed down. So, yeah. Yeah. Yeah.
Your favorite sheriff was Gleason and your least favorite, I think, was Harry Morse. Can you tell us why those two are?
Actually, Burton Becker is the worst. I mean, anytime the sheriff winds up in San Quentin, they pretty much got to give him, he's the worst. Morse is typically, what Morse is famous for is self-promotion because everything that he did, all the other sheriffs were doing as well, but he talked about it and told people all the things that went on. So every single sheriff, whether it was Broderick or any one of the ones near them, they were doing the same thing. If they would go to LA to capture somebody if they could. But Morris also is the one who has the longest career in law enforcement because he goes into private law enforcement at the end. And he does capture some pretty famous people in the course of his primarily private law enforcement, not necessarily during the 4 years that he was the sheriff in Alameda County. Yes.
One of the things I was fascinated by with the early sheriffs in the 1800s in particular was how often they visited right here in Mission San Jose at the old mission to exchange horses, stay overnight, going over to Sonoma and out into the Tri-Valley area. This was their primary route because of the comfortability and the ease of
crossing over the Sonoma grade with their horses or wagons. And even if they went down to Gilroy or further San Benito or Monterey counties, they always were here at the mission. And there are a lot of these desperado stories, you know, that are occurring at Scott's Corner in
Mhm.
Sonoma. And the famous murder that happened at the top of the Sonoma grade. And then he chases the man down 1,200 miles, you know, after making a pit stop here. So Mission San Jose was not inconsequential in terms of its county presence back then.
I think the point about Washington Township being critical to the development of California than we often get credit for. There's a person in the back going like this up and down with, you know, I got to flip the switch to keep going. So, so there, I think the other thing to remember is that there are so few ways to get from the coastal area, from the Bay Area across the hills. There are only a few passes that are easy to take. And the other thing is we have this thing that we got from Hollywood is that, you know, the sheriff gets on the horse and magically the next scene, he's, you know, getting the bad guy. When in fact, in California, it's 5-6 days later and it's not the same horse. He's changed horse 5 or 6 times. And most of the time they would go from town to town. They would rent a horse in Dublin. They would take a carriage from Oakland to like Dublin, change horses there, and then go off into the Central Valley and go and change horses as many times as they could as they went off someplace. So they're constantly stopping at the places, and the only place to stop are places like Mission San Jose, you know, Alvarado. There are not a lot of places where there are people all the way up to 1900. So, yes.
Was he not a chief justice somewhere and wasn't he governor? No, that's the same one and only.
That is the same. And he got his start in Alameda County as the district attorney. So he was able to parlay all that he was able to do into increasingly significant political roles. He became governor and he became on the Supreme Court member.
Justice.
Yes, he was Chief Justice Earl Warren. Yeah. I do want to highlight that we do have the supervisor is in the building. So, you know, there he is. He's there.
Did it.
He made it. Okay.
Steve, I was listening on Zoom the whole time. I thought. By the way, you mentioned the streets.
Roeder and Madigan and Gleason. Yes.
One of the sheriffs that you have up here, Steve, is Mayhew. And Mayhew was the family from down here in
Yep.
Washington Township. And not only was that a sheriff, but he was also on the Board of Supervisors and a multiple time. Along with Joseph Shin, the two of them, Mr. Mayhew and Mr. Shin of the Shin House downtown. They started the Niles Water Company in 1900 for water distribution off of Alameda Creek. And then they became enterprising enough that they, along with William Patterson, were the early architects of forming the Alameda County Water District, which is the oldest county water district in the state of California, with its principal authorizing legislation in 1913. And then we just celebrated this past Saturday, May 11th, our 110th anniversary as a district. And Mr. Shin married Mr. Mayhew's daughter, who was about half his age. And they became a lovely couple that occupied the Shin House downtown. So with that, I'd like to introduce the Honorable Supervisor David Halbert here this evening. And you had the front of the meeting for yourself, but I'm going to give you the back end and speak all you want.
All I wanted to say is that I arrived at home about the start of this meeting. And I said, I can't go to the meeting. I'm at home. I'll watch on Zoom. And then I realized if I'm on Zoom, I could listen to the meeting while I drive down here. Isn't technology great? But also, I grabbed this off my wall. This is in my home office. And it is indeed a framed photo of all of the county sheriffs, starting from Broder. Was the sheriff. We didn't have a photo of the current sheriff, so I'll have to add that. There, is that much better? Okay. But I wanted to say, Steve, first of all, it's great that you all are here listening to the history of Washington Township, but you have a real gem in Steve Minniear, and he knows everything about the history, even current events. It's amazing. Now, I will say, I think we have about 1,500 or 1,700 or so occupants, visitors, guests at Santa Rita today. And that's just because you're right, it's half or even less. But we also house some federal inmates. We make money when we do that off the federal government. So they're still very enterprising at the jail, from growing tomatoes to housing inmates of federal, but they haven't had escapes, many, just, yeah, not many. They used to, well, that we know of one, but they used to end up at McDonald's across the street in Pleasanton. And so you would hear the joke, if somebody escaped, they might be at McDonald's, and they've picked a few of them up there. Yeah, that's right. That's right. But I just wanted to say, Steve, thanks for all you do. A wonderful publisher of books, and just to have, and you can't stump Steve. He knows everything. But I've always been fascinated with the fact that I just have to ask, does anybody know where Robert Livermore, the namesake of our city in the Tri-Valley, you do know where he's buried? Everyone knows his admission. Nobody in Livermore knows this, but everyone in Fremont knows that Robert Livermore is buried. It's right next door to that. Right.
Tell you the story when the old wooden steeplechase church was being lifted off the ground. I was his mother, Cecilia Weed, former president here, and they were moving it across the bay over to San Mateo. Today it sits on El Camino and State Street in Burlingame.
Nice.
And it's been fully restored as a different church. So over multiple days, I was taking photographs here of the lifting of the church, dropping the power lines down so they could move it, or sold for $1. And then they discovered under the altar the grave of Robert Livermore.
Wow.
And I remember the whole community around here was just a buzz. It was like, what? Really?
Wow.
Yeah.
Very cool. You also do have another Alameda County official in the room, and that's Mr. John Weed. You know that he's on the Alameda County Assessors Appeals Board. If you have any problems with your property value assessment, try to file an appeal. He can tell you how to do it, I think.
Say we are, just to make it clear, not a subsidiary of the Alameda County.
Good. Excellent. Well, a great evening. And to those online, I was with you. I saw you. You are there. There's about 6 or 8 of them. And if you want to drive down here, you could probably do it with Zoom on like I did. But I'm really glad that I did it. And Steve, thank you again for all you do. And to everyone here, Paul, Tim, everyone, this is absolutely amazing. So glad I made it, and I will come back again at some time. But Kathy, yeah. Where do we want to put that? So I have, I guess, Steve, I'll get you one. I think you might already have one. Paul, this is what I call my Alameda County Supervisor Challenge Coin. You might know what challenge coins are. The military units have them. I have my own.
Veterans Organization down in Niles.
They would have one. That's right. Well, I'll present this to you and you can put it wherever you want. It's kind of cool looking.
Two.
Yeah. Now you have two.
This is from my drinking
Yeah.
buddies.
I have to shake your hand to give it to you. That's how we pass it. And it's got
Very much. Supervisor.
it's my honor to have you have it.
Appreciate it. It's not you. Picture of day.
Yeah, let's do it. Let's do that. Here. Okay, here we go. Come on in here, Paul.
John, you want to come up? You're the president.
John, John's the president. Come on in here, John.
Okay.
Best.
Take another one.
She is the best
One
district
that way,
representative.
And one
Thank
this way. There we go. Kathy and I worked together at the chamber.
Scary as that.
I can't imagine how much time we spent that.
I can tell you, I had a grandfather who, maybe needles. German, so they're
I've often wondered how awful it is to be at a dinner party with them at the end of the dinner to see how much of the food is still on it.
They save some for later. Day and had to sleep under trees at night and pitch their own tents and forage for food. They took some bare necessities with them, but one of my favorites is when, and they had not only their pistols, their Henry rifles, their long shot rifles, but buckshot rifles too for hunting. And so one night or afternoon, they're coming across a pasture up near Los Banos or something. And he takes out his buckshot rifle where he sees a bunch of quail and shoots into the crowd. 6 of the quail are drop down. And then in the evening, when they're finally making their meal, he said 4 thick slices of bacon, which provides the grease, 1 huge onion, and they defeathered the quail and they cooked the quail for dinner. And he said it was the most magnificent meal any 2 men could have ever had. Yeah, really. Yeah, shoot your own quail, but it sounded like a delicious dinner and now I want to make it. I still have quail running around my house in the Mission Hills. So are there any last minute questions for Steve?
Drawbridge out in the middle of the bay out here, on the route of the South Pacific Coast Railroad. The only way you could access it was from Alviso or from Oakland, and Drawbridge had a rather substantial city there with, on one side, it was the gin mills and the gambling dens and the hunting lodges, and on the other one was the residence. And I heard that the gin mills ran and the prostitution ran pretty much unmolested because the sheriff didn't want to get on the railroad at Oakland and come all the way down and take them, and the short wave was coming through Alvisa, but they'd have to go through Santa Clara County to get up, so they left it alone. Is that anywhere close to accurate?
So what I tell people pretty much all the time is there are good stories and then there is history. Okay, and history tends to be more accurate, but the stories tend to be more fun. Yeah. So there's probably a little bit in each of it, but also, you know, it's hard to say. When you look at history overall, you look at Western history, and you look at California history, what we don't know is a lot about the crime, or if you will, you know, the kind of blue collar history of what's going on. What was life really like for those of us who are working? And, you know, it's not really clear what it was like for a normal person or the normal entertainment stuff. Nor is it particularly clear that people have this really strong attitude that gambling was bad, you know, because everybody gambled. It's just a really messy situation. So yeah, could there have been gin joints? Yeah. You know, could it have been? Yes. Even as late as the 1960s and 70s, there were areas in Alameda County that, you know, some people said the sheriff deputies couldn't go to because it was too lawless. And those tended to be good stories. They tended not to be necessary. So it's a really mixed bag. But one thing we don't know much about is just how much crime it was in any place in California. And we don't necessarily know what people's attitudes are. So we don't necessarily know whether, you know, the local sheriff or the deputy is going. The other thing is, up until 1930, in most of the townships, law enforcement was not provided by the sheriff's office. It was provided by your constables. So every township had a justice of the peace, and every township had constables. And you would usually elect two, and they would appoint others. So think about this. You're elected by the people in your township to enforce the law. You want to get look too close there.
Is that your next book?
Yeah, the bigger question is, was it legal for an Alameda County sheriff to go into Drawbridge and take a prisoner back into Santa Clara County and bring him into?
He said he went 1,200 miles. Yeah. If there's a warrant out on somebody, I wonder how many times warrants were served on people that kind of looked like the real bad guy. But no, so they cross boundaries all the time. It's you had to stop at a certain boundary. So in the movie Silverado, there's a point at which the town marshal is going after the guys. And he gets to a certain point and someone shoots his hat off. And he says to his deputy, okay, we're stopping right here. My jurisdiction ends here. And the deputy says, no, it similarly, I'm sure there were a whole bunch of sheriffs who said, today, my jurisdiction goes all the way that I want it to go.
You talked about one of the sheriffs, somebody breaking into the bank and stealing all the money or all the county money. And I grew up in a little town in Northern California, and the police department was caught and accused of breaking into a bar and dragging a safe out of the bar and down to the canal to try to open it up, and were unsuccessful, but they tied it behind their car and drug it down 10 miles to the river to try to break it open.
So in all my stories, I don't really have any, oh my gosh, the sheriffs are bad. And here's the story. I can't tell you department in Alameda County was also responsible for rural fire prevention and response. So out in Livermore or someplace, there would be this guy and he would have his truck. And like we still do nowadays, we contract stuff out. So this guy was contracted out to the sheriff's office to be the rural fire. And it was primarily a service to ranchers, so that you wouldn't have brush fires that would destroy your stuff. But he got paid by the number of calls that he went to. And they caught him starting fires so that he could get paid a little bit more. But that's the closest I've got to that.
All right, Steve, and Al, hold on here. In the interest of time, because we want to give the supervisor a tour of the museum and we have a business meeting to follow, I'm going to conclude the meeting right now, and then we will resume after we have a little break and we'll get on to some business issues, okay? All right. Well, this is our township right up here, Supervisor, that we grew up with, the early development in the 50s and 60s. And Fremont was actually a small town. Yeah, we're going to finish right now. Thank you, everybody.